While Deion Sanders tried to make it sound like the New Orleans Saints were in on his son, Shedeur Sanders, I think his comments cast a lot of doubt. We got all of that and a little bit of lagniappe for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? I am your host, your friend, Ross Jackson, New Orleans native, your New Orleans Saints expert and credentialed member of the media covering those New Orleans Saints as a Saints beat writer over at LouisianaSports.net and Saints analyst with WWL TV. And on today's episode of Locked On Saints, I might think that Tyler Warren is tight end one in this year's NFL draft, but some folks really like Michigan's Colston Loveland. Tyler Warren has an exclusive club, but don't worry, the New Orleans Saints are invited. And while Deion Sanders tried to make it sound like the New Orleans Saints are in on his son, Shedeur Sanders, he might have conveyed a different message. We got all that and much more for you on today's episode. We appreciate you, whether it's your first time or your next time, being here with us this time, making it your first listen and being an everydayer here on the show, which is a proud part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode brought to you by the new 2025 Nissan Armada. Stay tuned for the Nissan Armada Player of the Week later on in today's episode. Deion Sanders tried to make it sound like the New Orleans Saints were in on his son, Shedeur Sanders, in this year's NFL draft, but I think he might have actually sowed some doubt instead. Let me explain. In case you missed it, there were two big comments by Deion Sanders, the first of which came from our good friend Adam Scott from over at the Saints Block Party podcast, where he was present at the Colorado Pro Day. During Deion's press conference, Adam asked Deion what he thinks about the possibility of Shedeur Sanders, his son and star quarterback with the Colorado Buffaloes, expected to be the second quarterback off of the board in this year's NFL draft, how he would feel about his son landing with the New Orleans Saints and Kellen Moore, who's worked with all these other quarterbacks. And Deion Sanders went on to say, I like their colors. Now, of course, the New Orleans Saints have black and gold, or are black and gold. The Buffaloes over in Colorado, they are also a black and gold, black and yellow. Black and gold, I think is fair to say for them. It drives me nuts the Pittsburgh Steelers call their colors black and gold, by the way. That's clearly black and yellow. It's literally like this. Anyway, sorry, I digress. He said he liked the colors, he liked the food, he liked the people, he thinks it would be a good situation for him, and so had some positive things to say about it. But the thing that I want to highlight in his response to Adam's question was the I like the colors part, because then on the broadcast of the Colorado Pro Day, Field Yates asked, was kind of making mention of how the Colorado Pro Day was a who's who of NFL personnel. And that led Deion Sanders to say, I want to get out of here with this. Don't you like these colors? I like these colors. Don't you like these colors? Don't you like these colors? And kept asking about the colors, which were black and gold, and ended up leaning into the camera, smiling at the camera and saying, I like these colors. I like these colors. And then Louis Riddick on the other side kind of joins in and, gives like a winky, wink, wink, nudge, like all this other stuff. And so the takeaway from it was that there was some heavy insinuation that something was happening with the black and gold, the New Orleans Saints. That's kind of the assumption here. And look, Deion Sanders is a very calculated person. I was on the Locked On Buffs podcast with host Kevin Borba, which I think is going to premiere on Monday. And he was kind of talking about, and we kind of view Deion Sanders the same way. Deion doesn't just say stuff. You know what I mean? He's kind of like LeBron. All of it's very calculated and all these other things. Like, he doesn't say anything he doesn't mean to convey something. And so many people are taking away from this that, he must be saying that the Saints really like Shedeur Sanders and that the Saints are going to draft Shedeur Sanders. And honestly, I disagree. I think Deion Sanders' comments, if anything, share that the New Orleans Saints are not in on Shedeur Sanders, because otherwise, why would you say it on a nationally televised program? We all know that every team's draft board is a big secret. What teams want to do in the draft, it's a big secret until they start, telling some people and all these other things. It's all a big secret. So what advantage do the New Orleans Saints get from Deion Sanders if Deion Sanders goes out and says, the Saints want to draft my son at number 9 overall? or want to trade up to draft my son or whatever. Here's what I think Deion Sanders is actually doing. He's trying to fight the slide. He's trying to fight the fall. The fall that I still am not completely convinced is even going to happen for Shedeur Sanders, by the way. I still think it's very possible that he ends up being drafted number 2 overall by the Cleveland Browns or even number 3 overall by the New York Giants. Oh, but they signed Russell Wilson and they signed Jameis Winston. Yeah, great. That's okay. You get a couple years out of that. Awesome. Cool. Shedeur Sanders gives you multiple years. Ideally, he's a franchise quarterback. And so I think, personally, what Deion's actually doing in that situation is trying to tell the rest of the NFL, if you let my son get to 9, he won't get to you later. If you let the Saints be on the clock, when Shedeur Sanders is on the board, he's going to go to New Orleans. So you, Pittsburgh Steelers, Seattle Seahawks, whomever it might be, I guess not Seattle. Seattle would technically pick it a little bit earlier. But anyway, any of these other quarterback needy teams, y'all better scoop him up before he makes it to number 9. I don't think Deion Sanders thinks that the Saints are actually going to draft Shedeur Sanders at number 9, but he's trying to convince and sell that they will in an attempt to try to get some other team to stop the slide, to jump up, or one of the other teams that are already positioned ahead of the Saints to scoop up Shedeur Sanders and not allow him to fall to number 9. I think that's what Deion Sanders is actually doing, because I think the truth of the matter might be that if Shedeur Sanders makes it to number 9, that there's a chance that the Saints don't actually take him. And then that slide goes all the way down to the 20s. And then what if the Pittsburgh Steelers don't take him because the Pittsburgh Steelers like the Band-Aid situation that comes with an Aaron Rodgers potentially? We'll see what Aaron Rodgers ends up actually doing. I can't believe we're actually waiting on Aaron Rodgers to make a decision. Like, I can't believe that somebody in the NFL is actually going, yeah, I'm going to wait for that guy. Like, come on. But anyway, there's a chance that slide keeps going. And then I'll tell you what, we did an episode yesterday that broke down all about what it would take to trade up into the bottom of the first round, a la the Baltimore Ravens in 2018, how they traded into pick 32 in order to be able to select Lamar Jackson after passing on Lamar Jackson twice earlier in that draft. They traded back when they could have taken him. Then they drafted Hayden Hurst when they could have taken him. And then they traded back in to take him. So the New Orleans Saints could potentially do something like that if they want Shedeur Sanders, if they want Jackson Dart, and they're there at the end, high 20s into the 30, 31, 32 selection. I don't take Deion Sanders' comments the same way that a lot of other people do, as an indication that the Saints intend to draft Shedeur Sanders at number 9. I think he's trying to convince people desperately that the Saints would draft him at number 9 if he were to fall there, in an attempt to try to make sure that his son is a top 5, top 7, top 8 draft selection to keep out the potential of him falling out of the middle of the first round. That's what I think Deion Sanders is actually doing there, because otherwise you've just done the Saints no favors. If you're all about the situation and you're all about the city and you're all about the people and the food and all of this stuff, then hush. Don't say anything. Let the Saints take him at 9. But I don't think that that's what it is that Deion Sanders is actually working towards. I don't think he's working towards the Saints taking at 9. He's working towards someone else taking him earlier to make sure that his son gets a decent payday out of this first round of selection. And you know what? Good on Deion Sanders. Coming up next, Tyler Warren, who could be the selection for the New Orleans Saints at number 9, the tight end out of Penn State, is having an exclusive club. But don't worry, the New Orleans Saints are a part of it. We got that coming up for you next as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. The Armada Player of the Week is brought to you by our friends at Nissan and the all-new 2025 Nissan Armada. Each week, we're taking one player out of this draft class and these prospects to pick the one that stands apart. In today's Nissan Armada Player of the Week is Penn State tight end Tyler Warren. Tyler Warren does it all, but I don't think he's going to have to do it all to be a difference maker in the NFL. I don't think he's got to be a Taysom Hill. I think he can be a Jimmy Graham. Play in line, play out wide, play in the slot, and be a big-time pass catcher for you that can contribute to your run game as well if needed out of the backfield or as a blocker. And I think that his talent is somebody that would work really well with a head coach like Kellen Moore, who has found success with athletic tight ends in the past. It's clear that this week's player of the week is out here ready to conquer the world with confidence, just like you can in that Nissan Armada or any of their other outstanding vehicles. So take the Nissan Armada, Rogue, or Pathfinder and go and find your next big adventure. Shop today at nissanusa.com. All right, family. Penn State tight end Tyler Warren, who could be the selection for the New Orleans Saints at number 9, is having an exclusive party. But don't worry, the New Orleans Saints are on the guest list, the short list of teams that are going to be present for Tyler Warren's private workout. Now remember, Tyler Warren didn't participate in the combine. He also didn't run any of the drills or workouts or participate in any of those things at the Penn State Pro Day. In fact, the Penn State Pro Day was light in terms of NFL personnel attendance because Tyler Warren wasn't participating, nor was Abdul Carter, who could be the number 2 overall selection in this year's draft. First defensive player off the board, expected, the edge rusher, also did not participate in any of his workouts. And so the Penn State Pro Day didn't get a lot of attention because of that. However, Tyler Warren is going to get some attention, but only the attention that he wants. This is a really interesting report that came out from Tony Pauline over at Sportskeeda, which is to give you a little bit of an idea of the credibility there. Earlier this offseason, there was a report that from Tony Pauline that the Denver Broncos would be interested in Juwan Johnson, for instance. And while that report was refuted in some cases, Juwan Johnson confirmed that report unbeknownst to him during his press conference after re-signing with the New Orleans Saints, where he said that he was in conversation with not only the Seattle Seahawks, but Sean Payton and the Denver Broncos as well, before ultimately making the decision to return here to New Orleans after a late night phone call with Kellen Moore, kind of helped to put things in perspective for him. So just a little bit of credibility check on this. So good stuff. Now, here's what Tony Pauline said. He said the New York Giants, the Chicago Bears, and the Indianapolis Colts were three of the teams that were named to be invited to this private workout for Tyler Warren. The only one of those 3 teams that selects ahead of the New Orleans Saints are the New York Jets, who select at pick number 7 overall. It goes them, then the Carolina Panthers at 8, then the New Orleans Saints at 9. But then he says, I've been told that the New Orleans Saints and both Los Angeles teams, so the Rams and the Chargers, have also seemingly joined the mix. So this puts the New Orleans Saints amongst 6 teams. That's it. 6 teams that are expected to be present for the private workout that will happen at some point before the NFL draft of Penn State tight end, first round tight end, Tyler Warren. This is really interesting. Now, again, the top 2 draft selections of those 6 teams are number 7 with the New York Giants and number 9 with the New Orleans Saints. And I do still think that Tyler Warren is a possibility for New Orleans. He's the name that we heard the most during the NFL scouting combine. Going into that, of course, that's an early draft kind of event. That's before anybody has run anything, didn't run anything, all this other stuff, before pro days, medical checks, top 30 visits, dinners with teams, and all this other stuff, private workouts, all that other stuff. And so obviously things change over time. But I mean, Tyler Warren was one of those early names that we all kind of knew that the Saints and Kellen Moore would potentially be interested in. And it makes sense. The New Orleans Saints do find success, or have been looking to find success, with tight ends over the course of the past few years since Jimmy Graham's departure, to the point where they even brought Jimmy Graham back and found success with him again, even though they didn't utilize him as much as they probably should have utilized him. They tried the Colby Fleener experiment. That did not work out. They tried the Jared Cook experiment, and that did work out until it very much didn't very quickly. And then, of course, they've been working on the Juwan Johnson thing and all this other stuff, to where I think that Juwan Johnson has the ability to be one of the top tight ends for New Orleans, but getting a bona fide, big-time playmaking threat, I think, helps to make Juwan Johnson's game a little bit stronger as well. So I don't rule out tight end, or Tyler Warren, rather, in this first round. And it seems like the New Orleans Saints are still invested in this idea that he could be the selection at 9. They're not doing anything that says that he will be, but they're doing things. If they're going to this private workout, and one of the only 6 teams that will be there, certainly gives an indication that they have some interest in the tight end. And where are you going to get him? You're going to get him at number 9 overall, unless the New Orleans Saints do the absolute unthinkable and do what they have not done since 2007, and trade back. Now, that's what today's show was going to be about, but obviously this Deion Sanders, Shedeur Sanders, Tyler Warren stuff kind of brings out this big conversation here, but we'll come back to trading back tomorrow. But I will say 2006, 2007 were the last two times the Saints were traded back. Those are the first 2 years of Sean Payton's tenure. Could they trade back in the first year or 2 years of Kellen Moore's tenure? Sure. Anything can happen. And so the New Orleans Saints could potentially be in that situation. But if not, at number 9, I think Tyler Warren could still make sense. Remember, it was Kellen Moore who said that he doesn't really look at positional value more than he looks at impact. He cares more about the impact that a player can have in the offense as opposed to being concerned about what position that impact is coming from, whether it be running back or wide receiver or tight end. Now, he did make an allusion to including fullback in that conversation, but I know that that is not where the New Orleans Saints are going to go in the first round. There's absolutely no doubt about that. There are still some things that are true about positional value: kickers, punters, fullbacks, potentially safeties, all these other things. But tight end is becoming less and less a part of that piece of the conversation. Brock Bowers last year, we saw first round tight ends in each of the years before that as well. And so we're seeing this continue to be a trend in the NFL to where all of a sudden we keep saying you can't draft a tight end in the first round, and the NFL keeps drafting tight ends in the first round. But I think beyond that, you're looking at not just a tight end, you're looking at Tyler Warren. And so if the New Orleans Saints really like Tyler Warren and all the different things that he can do as a receiver, as a route runner, his ability to be deployed from multiple positions on offense, and I don't mean just out of the backfield and stuff like that. I'm also talking about what he can do in line, out wide, and out of the slot. I'm going to give you some of those numbers here in a moment when we compare him and Colston Loveland, the Michigan tight end. But when we talk about the versatility of Tyler Warren, we can actually leave the running back stuff out. We can actually leave the quarterback stuff out, and we're still talking about a versatile player, which I think is one of the biggest mistakes that people make around him, is that they think that the only versatility that he has is his ability to either be a tight end or be a running back. And it actually goes much deeper than that. It's just that the stuff that you see with him taking 26 carries last year, it's interesting, and it's, you know, it lights up the highlight reels, and it makes the articles clickable, and all these other, makes the YouTube highlights clickable and all these other things. But really, the versatility goes beyond just the extreme. There's a lot of the standard versatility that you want in an NFL tight end in today's game that I don't think that if you ask him to play a different role in the NFL, that all of a sudden he becomes impact less. I think he can still be impactful for you here in New Orleans. So very interesting to kind of see the approach, right? No combine, no pro day, only having a handful of teams present, and the New Orleans Saints are one of those teams on that list. So we'll see when we find out a little bit more about who goes. I imagine Chase Haslett, the tight ends coach, would be a big part of that. But I'll tell you what, if Kellen Moore ends up being at that private workout, I think that gives you a pretty good indication of some interest there for sure. Coming up next, Tyler Warren is my tight end one, but he's not everybody's tight end one. Let's talk a little Michigan tight end Colston Loveland, who is really picking up some momentum as the top tight end in this year's draft. We got that coming up for you next as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation. I might think that Penn State tight end Tyler Warren is the best tight end in this year's draft, but not everybody agrees. And I want to go to a couple of reports, a couple of conversations, and do a little bit of a comparison between these two tight ends. And I'd love to know who your tight end one is as well. Look, Tony Pauline, that same piece that I quoted earlier when I was talking about how the Saints will be a part of Tyler Warren's private workout, or let me say are expected to be a part of Tyler Warren's little exclusive workout that he's doing. I think it's a great idea. I love that he's doing that. One of the other things that is mentioned in Tony Pauline's piece is that not every team has Tyler Warren as the top tight end or the top player at the position. He mentioned that there are several teams that he's spoken with that have him as the second tight end, all of which I believe behind Colston Loveland, the Michigan tight end. But he also even mentioned that there was a player that was there was a team rather that had Tyler Warren as the fourth tight end on the board. So that would probably put Mason Taylor above him for that particular team. Maybe Harold Fannin Jr. goes out above him as well in that situation. Or maybe it's Elijah Arroyo, the tight end out of Miami. Kind of interesting to imagine who the 3 tight ends would be that would be ahead of Tyler Warren on that board. But it's clear that not everybody, and this is typical of the NFL draft, that like there's no real consensus in terms of who the number 1 player at a position is. I know folks that have Amarion Hampton as the number 1 running back and not Ashton Jinty coming out of Boise State that go with the North Carolina Tar Heel instead. Just as an example. And so I wanted to take a look at why I think Tyler Warren is a top tight end, why people don't think Tyler Warren is the number 1 tight end, and where Colston Loveland ends up kind of landing in this conversation. The tricky part in terms of comparing Tyler Warren and Colston Loveland, there's 2 tricky aspects to this. First of which is that Colston Loveland only appeared in 10 games last year, dealt with some stuff. The second thing is Michigan's offense did not throw the football. or well, they did, but there's like a lot of opportunities there where Loveland was like wide open as a route runner, but the ball didn't go his way and the eyes didn't go his way. That reminds me of Dawson Knox, I think it is, that used to be at Ole Miss. Am I remembering that correctly? And he was this great tight end at Ole Miss, but he didn't have the numbers because no one threw the football his way. Everyone went to the big outside receivers, which made sense considering who those big outside receivers were, including A.J. Brown and all those other things. And so that's kind of where I've got Colston Loveland there. I don't think he's not a good tight end at all. I think he's a very good tight end. I just think he wasn't necessarily showcased in that Wolverines offense. That feels for certain to me. But when I do look at these 2 players, what I actually want to look at, less their stats, right? Because like comparing their stats isn't fair. 104 receptions, 1,233 receiving yards, and 8 receiving touchdowns for Tyler Warren last year. Last year in just 10 games, 56 receptions, 582 receiving yards, and 5 touchdowns for Colston Loveland. Good, but not in the same class of usage. You go back to 2023, where Colston Loveland actually played more snaps and appeared in more games, 45 receptions, 649 receiving yards, and 4 receiving touchdowns. So less receptions and less receiving touchdowns, but more receiving yards. And you add on top of that Tyler Warren as a rusher, Tyler Warren as a passer. And we're talking about 2 very, very different people. So what I wanted to do was take out of the conversation Tyler Warren as a rusher, Tyler Warren as a passer, and just look at the usage of deployment by these offenses. And what I found was both of these quarterbacks, when you go to their seasons in which they had the most snaps on the field on offense, both of these tight ends, I think I said quarterback, sorry, but both of these players used pretty similarly. And so when people criticize Tyler Warren saying that, well, the only versatility that he has isn't versatility you're going to find in an NFL offense, because most NFL offenses and the majority of NFL offenses aren't going to use him in the backfield. They aren't going to use him as a wildcat guy. They aren't going to use him at quarterback. They're not going to do all these different things. Fine. Let's compare just what he does as a receiver in his alignment. And if that's really the difference maker for you, it's not that different from Colston Loveland. It's kind of the same. So in 916 total offensive snaps for Tyler Warren in 2024 compared to Colston Loveland in 2023, 617 offensive snaps. I wanted to use the 2 seasons with the most offensive snaps for these 2 players in order to get the best percentages that will be comparable. I didn't want to do a season where Colston Loveland only had like less than 400 snaps, because then everything's going to be outweighted. So still a 300 snap difference here, but here we are. So in line, Tyler Warren, of his 916 offensive snaps, spent 45.2% of his time in line. That's lined up on the offensive line, off the shoulder of the tackle, ready to contribute as a pass protector or a run protector, or still running routes from that position as well. Compare that to Colston Loveland, who instead of 45.2% of the time was in line 45.9% of the time, a 0.7% difference. Okay, let's go further, Ross. It's not just about inline, it's about the versatility, all the different places that they can line up. Well, in the slot, 32% of Tyler Warren snaps of those 916 on offense, 32% were taken from the slot. Colston Loveland, 33%, a 1% difference. And that was me rounding up in both of those situations. Okay, well, what about out wide? Lined up as a receiver, 10.2% for Tyler Warren, 12.3%. To be fair, 2.1% difference there. Pretty sizable, but raw numbers 93 times for Tyler Warren, 76 for Colston Loveland. So if the idea is that Tyler Warren isn't a good enough tight end because he can also be a wildcat rusher and a fullback and a running back, if that's the argument, he's not as good a tight end because he's not being utilized as a tight end, I sincerely beg to differ based on these numbers. He is absolutely still being used as a tight end, and he's being used as a versatile move tight end and is producing at a ridiculous level. Now, there is some manufactured targets and manufactured touches stuff that plays into Tyler Warren's game, but a lot of that's happening from out of the backfield. We're talking about 104 receptions for 1,200 plus yards and 8 receiving touchdowns. And a vast majority of that came from him playing either in line, in the slot, or out wide. It's not a gimmick here. He's a very good player. And if the Saints were to take him at 9, it's okay to be upset with him taking a tight end at 9, but I don't know that I'd be super upset with him taking Tyler Warren at 9. Best playmaker available is what I say, is what you want to do. And if he's the best one on the board, I don't think that there's anything about the numbers of his utilization that says that he won't translate to the NFL. And if there's any team in the league that would find a way to utilize him out of the backfield, it just might be here in New Orleans anyway. Coming up in tomorrow's episode, would the New Orleans Saints potentially trade back for the first time since 2007? We'll take a look at why it could happen, what a deal could look like, and how it could have an impact on the draft. And then we'll turn our attention to Mock Draft Monday on Monday. And don't forget the release of our new Saint Squad show. Myself, John Hendricks, Deion Sanders, and Super Bowl champion Lance Moore, 8 a.m. Central Time live for you wherever you get your podcast. It'll go up after and then live on the Locked On Saints YouTube page. You don't have to subscribe to anything new. It'll all be right here where you get these daily episodes. And we'll continue 7 days a week here as we continue on as well. We'll see you tomorrow. Appreciate you very much as always for making us a part of your day, part of your routine, for saying yes to me and the show. If you see me, please say hi. And if you need anything else around your New Orleans Saints in between these episodes, make sure you follow me on your favorite social media at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing them, how you living. Let me know how you're momming them. And trust you, that nation. I'll holla at you.